Welcome to the Reawaken You podcast. I'm Kate Parker, your host, an empowerment coach, author, and entrepreneur who's on a mission to help women reclaim their power and live life on their own terms. Here we dive into real talk about breaking free from the patriarchy, embracing your authentic self, and stepping into your full potential. We explore how societal structures have held women back and how you can rise above them to create a life that's truly yours. Through the lens of authenticity, queen energy, and legacy, you will hear inspiring conversations, actionable strategies, and unfiltered insights to support you on your journey of self-discovery and empowerment. So if you're ready for honest, no bullshit empowerment with a touch of sass, you're in the right place. Let's reawaken your power together. Hey everyone. Welcome back to the Reawaken You podcast. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a wee while, and that is the topic of standards and the ones that we uphold for ourselves. And after thinking deep and hard about this, I know that when we elevate our standards, we elevate our life. So this makes me also wonder if perhaps I should turn this topic into a masterclass at some point, as I think that it's something that we could probably all use, even as a reminder to come back to ourselves and ask what we really want. You see, our lives rise or fall to the level of the standards that we set. Not the dreams that we imagine, not the goals that we scribble in journals, but the quiet and often invisible lines that say, this is what I allow, and this is what I will no longer tolerate. For years, I thought that standards were about external achievements, like the house and the career and the relationship and the shiny markers of success. But over time, I learned that standards are not external checklists. They are an internal compass, a reflection of how we see ourselves, what we believe we are worthy of, and how deeply we are connected to our own desires. So when you raise your standards, life shifts in a way that you cannot predict. Opportunities appear, relationships deepen, toxic patterns fall away, and in their place, a bigger, more expansive life unfolds. It's one that feels like yours in every way it never has before. Most of us underestimate how powerful our standards really are. They operate like the foundations of a house. They're unseen, but they're holding everything in place. If the foundations are weak, the structure wobbles. If the foundations are solid, the entire building stands tall. Our standards determine what we tolerate, what we say yes to, and what we quietly allow to erode our energy. So if we hold low standards, we end up living lives full of compromise. But when we set higher standards, we send a message to the world, and that message is something like, I am worthy of more. When I was in my 20s, I had a friendship that looked on the surface like one I should cherish forever. She had been one of my really good friends. She was even a bridesmaid at my wedding, and we had history. And from the outside, it seemed like the kind of bond that you would hold on to for life. But underneath, it was toxic, and every time I was with her, I felt drained. My body never relaxed, and I felt like I had to perform to make myself smaller, I guess, and I was really tiptoeing around jealousy, and not my jealousy, but her jealousy. Like when I bought a house, she was quite bristly, and when I got married, she behaved pretty strangely, and her own discomfort was spilling over into my joy, into my dreams, and into my hopes and desires, and it was, it stung. Her words, they were just like little cutting remarks delivered in moments that, I probably should have been celebrating, but anyway. But because she was also generous and kind, I excused it. I told myself this was just part of the friendship, and that maybe I was imagining the rest. I was almost gaslighting myself. And I think that that's the trap of compromise. When you convince yourself that crumbs of kindness make up for the constant erosion of your own energy. And eventually, the pressure, it became too much. Everything opened up. The cracks widened after I moved out of the city and created physical space between us. She used to live just around the road. Her jealousy, it did become a lot harder to ignore. And though I can't remember the exact trigger, I suddenly just knew that I couldn't tolerate it anymore. I couldn't keep pouring energy into a friendship that was leaving me feeling so hollow. And so I cut it off. And the relief was like immediate, and I felt lighter and freer and more myself. And my body knew before my mind did that this was the right decision. And in the space that opened, something beautiful happened. Like within months, I met one of my closest friends. She is a true soul sister who has brought nothing but depth and joy and loyalty into my life ever since. And that experience taught me something that I've never forgotten. When you raise your standards, you don't lose, you gain, and you create space for what was meant for you all along. Low standards don't just keep us stuck, but they rob us of the energy and the openness that we need for better things to arrive. You see, the truth is, what I know to be true, is that life is always reflecting back the standards that we set. If we accept half-hearted friendships, we live in the echo of those friendships. So if we settle for jobs that deplete us, we train ourselves to believe that that's all we're worthy of, that's all that we can have. But when we raise the bar, when we say, I will only welcome relationships that are nourishing, or jobs that honour my worth, or environments that let me breathe, the world will adjust, and it takes time, but it always does. For too long, desire has been painted as selfish, indulgent, or frivolous. Especially for women, desire has been something that we've needed to suppress or hide or apologise for, but desire is not greed. It's guidance. It's the soul's way of pointing us towards expansion. Your standards and your desires are intimately linked. Desire sets the vision, like the home, the love, the career, the lifestyle that lights you up. And standards create the container that either allows that desire to manifest or keeps it locked out. Many of my clients struggle here, and they whisper their desires like their secrets, like, I want to be in love with someone who adores me, or I want to run a business that feels free and luxurious, or I want to live in a body that feels radiant. And then almost immediately that shame creeps in. And then they're saying, is that too much to ask? Am I being selfish? Shouldn't I just be grateful for what I have? But gratitude and desire are not opposites. Gratitude roots us in the present, and desire pulls us forward into the future. And together they are a powerful force for transformation. So to raise your standards, you must first connect with yourself. You need to hear your own truth clearly, without the static of other people's opinions. And this is where journaling, reflection, and stillness becomes really valuable. When you are connected, you notice the subtle signals in your body. That sense of contraction when someone crosses a boundary, that flood of relief when you let go of something heavy. Your body, it never lies. Boundaries are not walls. They are invitations. They say, this is how I protect my energy so that I can love more fully, live more fully, and show up authentically. When you raise your standards, boundaries naturally follow. You stop saying yes out of obligation, and you stop tolerating disrespect. You stop dimming your light. And the moment you raise your standards in one area, it ripples out into every other part of your life. You begin to eat differently, speak differently, love differently, create differently, because standards set a frequency, and the frequency determines reality. Ultimately, the standards that you set are not just about you. They ripple into the lives of your children and your communities, your friends, your colleagues, they shape the legacy that you leave. When you choose to live by higher standards, you're not just elevating your own life, you're expanding what is possible for everyone who sees you. Raising your standards is not about perfection. No, it's not about rigid rules or constant striving. It's about choosing yourself, choosing to live in alignment with your worth, your desires, and your truth. The moment you say, I will no longer tolerate less than love or respect, authenticity, and abundance, the architecture of your life begins to shift. Friendships align, love deepens, opportunities multiply, and energy returns. Because this is the secret. Life doesn't expand because you do more. It expands because you expect more. When you raise your standards, you don't just get more, you become more. And from that place, the big life, the one that you've always known deep down that you were meant for, it starts to unfold. We live inside the quiet architecture of our standards. Every day, without consciously realizing it, we make decisions based on the lines that we've drawn around what we will and won't accept. Those lines, they're sometimes explicit, sometimes fuzzy. They form a blueprint of our lives. Think of standards as like the unseen operating system of your life. They're the rules that you've agreed to, consciously or unconsciously. It's about what is possible for you, what you're worthy of, and what kind of treatment you will tolerate from others. And some people live with really high standards. They expect respect in their relationships. They demand growth from others, and they won't accept opportunities that don't align with their truth. Others can live with low standards. They settle for jobs that deplete them, relationships that diminish them, and lifestyles that barely sustain them. And the difference between the two is not talent, not luck, but it's standards. We don't get what we want, we get what we tolerate. Tony Robbins said that line years ago, and it's always stuck with me because it's simple, but it's also quite profound. Desire matters, vision matters. But the thing that decides whether or not you will get the life that you want is whether your standards align with your vision. At the core of standards lies self-image. You cannot consistently live above the way you see yourself. If you believe that you are unworthy of love, you will tolerate half love. If you believe money is hard to come by, you will set standards that keep you in scarcity. If you see yourself as someone who just gets by, you will unconsciously reject opportunities for abundance. Psychologists call this the self-concept. It's the story that we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. Neuroscience shows us that once the self-concept is established, the brain seeks out evidence to confirm it. This is called the confirmation bias. So if your self-image is low, you'll notice all the reasons why you should accept less. But if your self-image is strong, you will see proof everywhere that you are worthy of more. And this is the really important thing. Your self-image is not fixed. It can evolve. And one of the most effective ways to shift it is by raising your standards. So when you decide, I will no longer accept this, you send a signal into your subconscious that says, I am someone who is worthy of more. And once you make that choice, your entire identity begins to rewire around it. What I know to be true is that the world does mirror back the standards that we hold. So if we tolerate partners who don't communicate, we will attract more silence. If we accept workplaces that undervalue us, then we're going to see the same patterns repeat. If we allow friends to chip away at our joy, we'll find ourselves surrounded by people who thrive on dimming us. But the moment that we say no more, everything begins to shift. Life takes a cue from us. Raising your standards is not about perfectionism or being rigid. It's about identity alignment. You decide who you are, and then you live as though that were true. Here's what happens psychologically when you raise a standard. Cognitive dissonance will kick in. Your brain doesn't like inconsistency. So when you set a new standard, like I only accept respectful communication in relationships, then you start to find yourself in a situation that doesn't match. And your brain is going to feel discomfort, and that discomfort pushes you to act differently. The reticular activating system filters differently. This is the part of the brain that acts like a gatekeeper. It filters what you notice in the world. Raise your standard, and suddenly you will notice opportunities, people, and resources that were completely invisible before. Your neural pathways will begin to rewire. So each time you act in line with your new standard, you strengthen the neural connection that says, this is who I am. And over time, it just becomes second nature. This isn't just a mental process, it's embodied. Your body knows when a standard has been crossed. It will contract, and you're going to feel drained and anxious or small. And when you uphold a standard, your body will feel lighter, safer. It'll feel freer. So listen to the signals. That is vital. They are the compass that keeps you aligned with your truth. So here are a couple of practical tools for raising your standards through your self-image. Number one is you should audit your life. Just take a piece of paper, right, and draw 3 columns. One is at the top of column 1, you write what I'm tolerating. Top of column 2, you put in what I want. And the top of column 3, you put in what your new standard is. So in the first column, you're going to list everything that you're putting up with, like a messy environment or late night scrolling or friendship that drains you. In the second column, under what you want, you write in what you actually desire. And in the third column, you write the standard that would support your desires. So for example, your desire might be, I want peace of mind. So the standard that you're going to write will be something like, I no longer accept people who disrespect my time. The second part is identity affirmations. So instead of saying, I want something, you start by saying, I am someone who. This anchors it in to your soul. So I am someone who only allows respectful communication, or I am someone who prioritizes my health, or I am someone who lives in abundance. The third part is micro elevations, right? So raising standards doesn't always mean dramatic decisions. Sometimes it just starts with really small acts, like drinking from a beautiful glass instead of a plastic bottle, or buying flowers for yourself, or choosing silence over gossip. These tiny upgrades signal to your subconscious, this is who I am now. And the fourth part is body check-ins. So when you're making decisions, you ask your body. You ask, do I feel contracted or expanded? Because expansion means alignment, and contraction means a standard is being crossed. If I could go back to my 24-year-old self, I would tell her this. It is okay to let go. It is okay to raise the bar, and it is okay to release friendships, jobs, or habits that no longer serve you. Because you're not abandoning them, you're making space for the life that matches who you are becoming. Standards are not just rules, they are declarations of identity. They tell the world and yourself, this is who I am, this is what I deserve, and this is the life that I will live. Desire has always carried a complicated reputation. For centuries, it was painted as selfish or greedy or sinful, and women in particular have been conditioned to silence their desires, to be good girls, to not want too much, or to be content with what they're given. But for me, desire is sacred. Desire is the soul's way of pointing us towards expansion. It's not frivolous or indulgent, it's guidance. So when you feel the tug of wanting more love, more abundance, more joy, more freedom, that is not your ego being greedy. That is your deeper self whispering that this is where you are meant to grow next. Think of desire as a compass. Your standards create the container for your life, but desire is what sets the direction. Without desire, we just wander aimlessly, tolerating what's in front of us. But with desire, we have the vision to move forward. And many of us learn really early on to suppress our desires. As children, we may be told, don't be greedy, don't make a fuss. And maybe we watched our mothers deny themselves what they wanted, pouring everything into everyone else while leaving themselves last. And so we learn to shrink, we learn to want less, to pretend that we were satisfied with the crumbs. But desire doesn't disappear when we suppress it. It just simmers underground, showing up as resentment or frustration or envy or burnout. And when we cut ourselves off from desire, we cut ourselves off from vitality. To live a full, expansive life, we must reclaim desire. So desire and standards, they work together. Desire points to where you want to go, and standards determine whether you will get there. Desire says something like, I want a loving, respectful partnership. And standards will say, I will not settle for someone who belittles me or withholds communication. Desire could say, I want financial freedom, and standards will then say, I will no longer tolerate undercharging, overspending, or living in scarcity. Desire could say, I want to feel radiant in my body, and standards can then say, I choose food, movement, and rest that honors my well-being. Because without desire, standards have no direction. And without standards, desire remains like a fantasy. But together, they create momentum. There have been times in my life where desire felt almost dangerous, when I wanted more love, more freedom, more abundance. And inside, there was a voice that it would whisper to me, who are you to want that? Be grateful for what you have. And for years, I confused gratitude with settling. I thought wanting more meant I wasn't appreciative. But gratitude and desire are not opposites. Gratitude roots us in the present. Desire pulls us forward into the future, and both can coexist. And the moment that I realized this, I gave myself permission to want more without apology. And that just changed everything. It changed my mindset. One of my clients taught me the most profound lesson about desire. She had been in a long-term relationship, even making plans to move in with her partner. And on the surface, everything, it looked fine. But beneath the facade, she was suffocating. Communication was scarce, and she constantly felt like she was too much for him, too emotional, too honest, too expressive. And he was calm, yes, but it was not the calm of safety. It was the calm of distance. And whenever she reached for more intimacy, he withdrew further. Her deepest desire was for love that was open and full and mutual. And that was the very thing that kept her stuck. She thought that if she just held on, if she just gave more of herself, eventually he would meet her in the way that she longed for. Desire, when left unchecked, can tether us to what is misaligned, keeping us chasing crumbs while telling ourselves that it's a banquet. I remember her sitting on my sofa in tears, whispering that she didn't know where she stood. And I asked her 2 questions that cut her to the core. Do you really want to spend your life with someone who cannot meet you? Or are you chasing a future that will never fulfill you simply because it's with the wrong person? And in that moment, her tears shifted. And she saw the truth. She wasn't wrong for desiring love. She desired love that was deep, safe, and expansive. But what was wrong was lowering her standards to try and get it from someone who couldn't provide it. And that day marked a turning point. Desire stopped being the chain that held her back, and it became the compass that set her free. She stopped apologizing for wanting too much. She raised her standard for what love must feel like, and she walked away. She rebuilt herself and made space for what she truly desired, and life responded. Today, she's got everything that she once whispered through tears. She's got a partner who sees her fully, and a home that they've built together, a family, and a life that just feels abundant and aligned. And her story reveals the truth about desire. It can trap us when we pair it with low standards, keeping us stuck in longing without fulfillment. But when we root desire in worthiness and we align it to higher standards, it becomes a force that expands our lives into everything we once thought was too much to ask for. Throughout history, women who honoured their desires and have their standards raised often disrupted entire systems. Emmeline Pankhurst desired equality, but she refused to settle for the crumbs of political representation, and she demanded the feast of suffrage instead. Anita Roddick, founder of The Body Shop, she desired an ethical business world, and she refused to tolerate exploitation and proved that commerce could coexist with activism. Nina Simone desired artistic and political freedom. She raised her standards against the music industry. They wanted her to conform, and she used her voice to challenge radical injustice. And each of these women, they listened to desire and they set standards that matched. And in doing so, they didn't just change their lives, they changed lives all around the world. So why does desire scare us so much? I think it's because desire exposes the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And that gap, I think it feels quite uncomfortable. I don't know if it does for you, but it definitely does for me. And it does require us to be really honest, to say and to ask, am I living in alignment with my truth? Or am I tolerating less because it feels safer? And sometimes it feels easier to suppress desire than to face the pain of the gap. Because the gap is not a punishment, it's just an invitation. The discomfort is what drives growth. So in order to reconnect with your desires and to use them to elevate your standards, there's a couple of things that you can do. You could do desire journaling. So each morning you ask yourself, what do I desire today? And what do I desire this month, this year, or in my lifetime? Just write without judgment. Let the truth spill out, even if it feels too much. No one else is going to read it but you. The other thing you can do is you can use a desire filter. So, when you're making decisions, you ask, does this move me closer to my desire or further away? If it moves you closer, just say yes. And if it pulls you away, you raise your standard. You could reframe your desire as guidance. So each time you feel guilty for wanting more, you just reframe it. You say something like, this is not greed, it's just my soul pointing me towards growth. Or you could use role models, identify women, historical or personal, who live by their desires unapologetically. Let their stories remind you that your desires are not only valid, but necessary. At its core, desire is expansive. It is life itself asking you to grow. And when you honor your desires and raise your standards to meet them, you become a completely different person. You become more alive and more magnetic and more aligned. The life that you long for is not waiting for you someday. It begins the moment that you allow desire to be your compass and your standards to be your guardrails. Raising your standards and following your desires only works when you are connected to yourself. Without self-connection, it's like building a house on sand. You might set the standards, but they won't stick. You might whisper desires, but they'll just get drowned by the noise of everybody else's expectations. So self-connection means that you are able to hear your own voice clearly, above conditioning, the distractions, the obligations, and the endless opinions of the outside world. It's about anchoring back into who you are when the world pulls you in 100 different directions. When we are disconnected, we make choices out of habit and fear or people pleasing. We settle for lives that look fine on the outside but feel empty within. And when we're connected, we make choices from truth, and from that truth, even when it's uncomfortable, it always leads us home. One of the most powerful ways that we can connect with ourselves is through the body. The body is always speaking through tension or fatigue, butterflies, expansion, contraction. Yet this is all within our nervous system. Think about the last time that you said yes when you wanted to say no. Did your stomach twist? Or your shoulders, did they tighten? Did you feel, smaller in your chest? Well, that was your body telling you a standard has been crossed. Now think of a moment when you made a decision that was aligned with your truth. Did you feel lighter, energized, more spacious? That was your body affirming your standard. So often we override these signals with logic, like I should just do this, or I owe it to them, or I don't want to make things awkward. But when we ignore the body, we disconnect from ourselves. So learning to trust your body's signals is one of the most powerful ways to enforce higher standards. Boundaries are often misunderstood as barriers that push people away. And in truth, boundaries, they are a radical act of love. It's love for yourself and for others. They say, this is what I need in order to be well, or this is what allows me to give sustainably without resentment. And this is how I protect my energy so that I can show up authentically. When you raise your standards, boundaries, they naturally follow. You stop answering texts at midnight. You stop excusing poor treatment. You stop pouring into relationships that don't pour back. Boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. They protect your self-connection so that you can keep living from your truth. There was a season in my life, and I call it a season because it lasted a really long time, when I ignored my body's signals completely. I pushed myself into overwork. I was constantly, I was always go, go, go. I was writing books and working full time and being a mother and a wife, and I thought that I was being productive, but what I was really doing was abandoning myself. And I think we have all been there. The signs were there. Exhaustion, irritability, that constant sense of rushing, pain in my body. But I didn't listen. My standard at that time was survival. Just keep going. Just get through. And it wasn't until I hit burnout that I finally reconnected with my body. I realized that my body had been speaking the whole time. It had been begging me to slow down, to rest, to care. That moment shifted everything. I had to raise my standard from survival to thriving. And since then, I've built rituals of self-connection into my life. Walks on the beach or journaling, meditation, honoring my energy, checking in with my body before making commitments. Those practices don't just help me feel better, they help keep my standards aligned. One of my clients struggled for years with saying no. She said yes to every request, extra work from her boss, extended emotional support for her friends, emotional labor for her family. And on the outside, she looked reliable and gorgeous and generous, but on the inside, she was exhausted. She was resentful, and when we worked together, I asked this sort of question. It was, whose life are you living? Are you living yours or theirs? And she realized that she had been abandoning herself in the name of being good. Her standard was, I will tolerate anything as long as others are happy. And her other standard was, I am the only one who can hold this together. Maybe that was more of a belief. But, the question really was, what if she enabled others to stand on their own 2 feet? What if she no longer needed to be the martyr of the family? And slowly she began to practice boundaries. And at first, she was terrified. We all are. Saying no made her feel guilty. But then eventually something did shift. And each time she said no, she felt a little lighter, more herself, more free, more empowered. And eventually she began to see boundaries not as rejection, but as love. Love for herself, love for the relationships so that could now thrive without hidden resentment. Today she lives, with higher standards in most areas, her work and her friendships and her energy. And it all began with the courage just to reconnect with herself. Self-connection is not just psychological, it's also spiritual. So when you tune into yourself, you tune into a deeper intelligence that runs through everything. Some call it intuition, some call it the soul, some call it God. I often call it the universe. Whatever name you use, the truth is this. When you are deeply connected to yourself, you access guidance that goes beyond logic. You just know. You sense what's right. You feel pulled towards the next step. This guidance is quiet. It whispers. It requires space. And when your life is filled with noise and distraction and other people's demands, you just can't hear it. But when you slow down, when you reconnect, the guidance becomes clear. So each morning, just ask yourself, what do I need today? What do I desire today? What do I refuse to tolerate today? And just write the answers down. And before making a decision, close your eyes and imagine saying yes. Notice how your body feels, and then imagine saying no. What feels more expansive? Which feels contracted? Let your body guide you. Write out, some boundaries, so that it doesn't feel so alien to you. So you could say, thank you for asking, but I can't take that on right now. Or I need some time to think about this before I commit. Or that doesn't work for me, but here's what I can offer. And practice them. It just makes it easier in the moment. And just create some daily rituals or that just bring you back to yourself, like meditation or journaling or nature walks or breath work or creative expression. These are not luxuries. They are lifelines to reconnect you. And when you feel disconnected, you do tolerate too much, you forget your worth, and you live by other people's rules. But when you are connected, you hear your truth clearly. You set standards that protect your energy. You follow desires that expand your life. Self-connection is the foundation. This is what makes standards sustainable and desires trustworthy. Without it, it feels like you're just building on sand, but with it, you're building on a bedrock. When you raise your standards, something extraordinary happens. Life itself begins to rearrange. Opportunities appear, relationships deepen, toxic patterns fall away, and a bigger life, the one that you didn't know was possible, it starts to unfold. It's not magic, it's alignment. Standards are like tuning forks. When you raise them, you vibrate at a different frequency, and the world, inevitably, unfailingly, it will respond. And the change often starts small. You decide, I will no longer tolerate being spoken to that way. And suddenly the conversation shifts. You feel stronger in your voice. That strength, it carries into your career. You ask for what you're worth, and money follows. That abundance, it lets you create a more beautiful home environment. The environment then fuels your creativity, and suddenly you're living in a reality that feels entirely different, all because of one new standard. This is the domino effect of standards. One shift and the rest begin to fall into place. Vivienne Westwood, who I absolutely love, right? She raised standards for what fashion could be. Instead of just settling for conformity, she demanded disruption. And in doing so, she changed not just style, but culture. Madonna is another one. She refused to be told that she was too much. But her standard was absolute self-expression. She expanded what women believed was possible in music and identity. Diana Rigg, who is another of my favourite women, she demanded respect in a male-dominated industry, in acting. And when she discovered that her male co-star was earning significantly more, she didn't stay silent. She raised her standard and she made space for the conversations about gender pay. And those conversations continue today. They didn't just change their lives, they changed the possibilities for everyone who came after them. That is the power of raising your standards. So why does raising standards create such dramatic ripple effects? Well, each time you raise a standard, you enforce a new identity. You are no longer someone who accepts less. You're someone who demands alignment. And the brain, wired to act consistently with identity, it begins filtering all decisions through that lens. Low standards, they leak energy, but high standards, they conserve and expand it. And when you stop tolerating draining friendships or jobs or habits, you free up energy for creativity, love, and growth. High standards are magnetic. When you treat yourself as worthy, others do too. You draw in relationships and opportunities and resources that match your frequency. After leaving my husband all those years ago, something surprising happened. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had set standards of how I wanted to live. I knew what I wanted my house to feel like. I knew how I wanted to set new routines. And I knew that by putting in the work, I would not fail. And it gave me elevated faith and trust within myself. I noticed that I had more energy for my career. I began dreaming bigger about what I wanted to create in the world. My self-image shifted. And once I saw myself differently, I just couldn't unsee it anymore. And that one decision to set my own standards on how I wanted to live and feel in the world, it rippled into every area of my life, and it taught me that raising standards is not about loss, it's about gain, it's about expansion. And here's what I know to be true. Your standards don't just shape your life, they shape your legacy. When you raise your standards, your children notice. Your friends notice. Your community notices. You give silent permission for others to expect more for themselves. This is how generational patterns shift. This is how cultures evolve, not through grand revolution, but through individuals, quietly and consistently refusing to accept less. Think of the ripple effect. A woman decides she will no longer tolerate disrespect. Her daughter grows up never questioning her worth. The daughter then raises her children with the same clarity, and within a few generations, an entire family lineage transforms. Your standards don't just expand your life, they expand the lives of everyone that comes after you. So choose one standard to raise. Don't overwhelm yourself with an entire overhaul. Just choose one area where you are tolerating something small but significant, and raise the standard there. Watch the ripple effect. Phrase your new standard as an identity. So use the I am words, like I am someone who only works in environments where my voice is valued. I am someone who takes self-care seriously and I prioritize it. Reinforce it with rituals. Rituals, they help your nervous system align and adjust. Pair your new standard with something small, like a daily action, like taking your vitamins when the kettle is boiling, or lighting a candle before journaling, or dressing in clothes that make you feel powerful, or just saying no once a day. And celebrate it. Notice the changes. Celebrate it. Every time life responds to your raised standard, mark it down. Track it. It just reinforces the belief that you are safe and right to expect more. Raising your standards is not about being demanding, rigid, or entitled. It's just about being in alignment. It's about living in your truth. Living your worth. And when you raise your standards, You gain energy, clarity, and opportunities. You begin to live a bigger life, one that reflects not just what you do, but who you truly are. And the beauty is your expansion. It doesn't stop just with you. It ripples outward, touching everyone around you. Your standards become the unspoken invitation for others to rise. This is how lives change. This is how legacies are created. So let me leave you with this. Desire is your compass. Self-connection is your anchor. Standards are your guardrails. And together, they build the architecture of the life that you were always meant to live. You do not need to wait for permission. You do not need to justify it. The moment you say, I will no longer tolerate less, you begin to expand into a bigger life that was waiting all along. Because raising your standards is not just about getting more, it's about becoming more. And when you become more, the world around you expands too. Right. That's it for today. That was a very long one. Perhaps I should turn it into a masterclass. I hope you all enjoyed that. I would love to know what standards you were raising. Send me a message or whatever. Get in contact. I would love to know. And I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Reawaken You podcast. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new conversation. And if you're looking for even more inspiration and actionable insights, sign up for the Reawaken Quarterly magazine at www.reawaken-coaching.com. Reawaken Quarterly is your go-to resource for staying empowered, inspired, and on track with your personal growth journey. Packed with thought-provoking articles, practical tools, and powerful stories, it's the perfect companion to have by your side as you reclaim your power and create the life you desire. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep stepping into your power and owning your journey.